It was my 30th birthday, and I was alone. A single slice of store-bought cake sat on the table, no candles, no laughter. My phone buzzed, and for a split second hope flickered. Maybe this time they remembered. Maybe my family would finally see me. But when I opened the message, my chest caved in. Storm, don't forget to send $5,000 for Miles's promotion party. It's a big moment for your brother. We're counting on you. No happy birthday. No, we miss you. Just another reminder that even on my day, I existed only as a shadow and a wallet. That night, humiliation came crashing down on me. But truth is, it had been there my entire life. I grew up in a house where my brother Miles was the sun, and I was just a shadow. Everything revolved around him. His grades, his trophies, his future. And me, I was the footnote, the afterthought. I remember being 10, waiting on stage at my first piano recital. My hands trembled over the keys, scanning the crowd for my parents. The seat I'd saved for them was empty. I played anyway, forcing every note out of shaking fingers, praying they would at least clap at the end. But when I looked up, they weren't there. They had left early to get Miles ready for his debate competition. That was the first time I realized my achievements would always come second. By 17, I should have been used to it, but it still burned. Graduation day. My name called, the applause scattered. The camera flashes all aimed at Miles. I walked across the stage, diploma in hand, but my parents were too busy bragging to another family about the scholarship Miles had just secured. I stood alone in my cap and gown, smiling for nobody. Years later, it was the same story. Family dinners weren't meals. They were coronations for Miles, his promotion, his new car, his engagement, my job, my struggles, my milestones. Those barely made it into conversation. The worst came one evening, a night that burned itself into my memory. We were gathered around a long oak table at my parents' house. Glasses clinked. Laughter filled the air, all of it for Miles's newest achievement. My father raised his voice, pride booming. "Storm, didn't you just get a bonus at work? That's perfect timing. You can put 20,000 toward the celebration," he added. "After all, family supports family." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. My mother nodded, her tone sharp. "Yes, Dom, it's the least you can do. Miles has carried this family's name with honor. You should be proud to help." The humiliation burned through me. I felt like I was 10 again, begging for a seat in a crowd that had no space for me. My uncles smirked. Cousins whispered. My brother sat tall in his chair, basking in the praise, not once telling them to stop. My chest tightened. I wanted to disappear. For years I had swallowed my pride, told myself that keeping peace mattered more than my dignity. But something broke that night. I pushed back my chair, my voice shaking but loud enough to silence the room. "No, I won't give you a cent." The air froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. My father's eyes narrowed. My mother's face twisted in disbelief. Miles shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling. Yet for the first time in my life, I didn't bow my head. Humiliation had defined me for decades, but that night for the first time, I chose defiance over silence. When I walked out of that dinner, my legs trembled, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, I hadn't bowed my head. Yet as I closed the door behind me, I knew what was coming, the cost of defiance. The calls started the next morning. My father's voice thundered through the voicemail. "Ungrateful, you embarrass this family. After all we've given you, you can't even stand beside your own brother." Then my mother's softer tone dripping with guilt. "Tom, you've broken my heart. Families don't turn their backs like this. Call us back before it's too late." I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I didn't answer. For once, silence was my weapon. The separation wasn't loud. It was quiet, suffocating. I muted the family group chat where cousins and aunts filled the thread with congratulations for Miles. No one noticed my silence. No one asked why I hadn't replied. I was invisible, and maybe I always had been. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit alone in my apartment wondering if I'd gone too far. Was I cruel for refusing? Was I betraying the people who raised me? Guilt gnawed at me like termites eating through old wood. But then I'd remember the look on my father's face, the expectation in my mother's voice, the smirks of my uncles. I'd remember the way my brother just sat there basking in the glory, never once standing up for me, and the guilt would turn into anger. Days passed, the calls slowed, but the messages didn't. My mother sent long texts reminding me of childhood moments when she sacrificed everything. My father sent short, sharp ones. Grow up, be a man, take responsibility. And then finally, my brother Miles himself. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just help with the party. You know they'll never forgive you otherwise. That was when I knew forgiveness was never theirs to give because they had never seen me in the first place. I stopped answering altogether. I blocked numbers. I told myself I didn't care if they thought I was selfish. Maybe I was. But selfishness felt like freedom compared to the prison of being a shadow. Still, separation comes with a price. The next family event came and went without an invitation. Photos appeared online. Miles cutting into a massive cake. My parents beaming at his side, relatives clapping. I wasn't in a single frame. Not forgotten, just erased. It hurt like hell. But it was also the beginning of something else. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, even if it meant walking alone, and I knew this was only the start. The real fall was still waiting for me. After the separation, I told myself I was finally free, free from the shadow, free from the endless humiliation, free from being the forgotten son. But freedom can be a cruel thing. It can strip away not just the chains, but the ground beneath your feet. At first, I convinced myself I was strong. I worked late at the firm, signed up for projects no one else wanted, told myself I didn't need their approval. When colleagues asked about my family, I laughed it off, said I was too busy to see them. But the truth gnawed at me in quiet hours. I wasn't busy, I was alone. The retaliation came fast. My father showed up at my office one afternoon, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He leaned over my desk, his voice low but venomous. You think you can walk away from us, from your own brother? You're nothing without this family storm. Nothing. I wanted to fight back to tell him he was wrong, but the words stuck in my throat. My boss, a man who respected image above all else, watched from the doorway. From that moment, the air around me at work grew colder. I was no longer the promising employee. I was the troubled one, the man with family drama spilling into the office. Then came the whispers. My brother Miles, ever the golden child, had a way of turning stories in his favor. At social gatherings, he'd casually mentioned, Storm's been struggling. You know, he's different now, not sure what happened to him. People nodded sympathetically, clucking their tongues, never once asking me for the truth. Friends drifted, not because they didn't care, but because I pushed them away. Every invitation I declined, every text I left unanswered. I told myself they wouldn't understand, that they were better off without my bitterness staining their joy. The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit at their tables and watch them live the life I never had, surrounded by people who actually saw them. Nights became unbearable. I'd sit in my apartment staring at the walls, replaying every moment of being overlooked. The piano recital, the graduation stage, the dinner table where I was asked to sacrifice once again. My mind was a cruel theatre, looping humiliation on repeat. I turned to the bottle. At first it was one drink to help me sleep. Then it was two, then three, until the amber liquid was the only thing keeping the silence from crushing me. The more I drank, the more the voices in my head grew louder. "You'll never be enough. You were never meant to shine. You're just a shadow." The spiral was quick and merciless. I stopped showing up to work on time. My projects slipped. My boss pulled me aside. His tone clipped. "Get it together, Storm. You're wasting potential." I nodded, promised I'd do better. But the next day I was back at the bar, drowning in promises I couldn't keep. Bills piled up. The landlord slipped notices under my door. I sold off things piece by piece. The guitar I once played in college, the suit I wore to job interviews, even the watch my grandfather had given me. Each sale was another reminder I was unraveling thread by thread. Loneliness became a living thing, a shadow that followed me even in sleep. I'd wake at 3:00 a.m., heart pounding, drenched in sweat, reaching for a phone that never rang. Sometimes I scrolled through family photos online. Miles surrounded by relatives, my parents glowing with pride. I zoomed in, searching for even a hint of my name in the captions. Nothing. I wasn't just excluded, I had been erased. The lowest point came one winter night. The power had gone out in my apartment because I couldn't pay the bill. I sat in the dark, a half-empty bottle beside me, candles flickering weakly. On the table lay a letter from my bank, overdrawn again. Next to it, a photo from years ago. I was 12, holding a small science fair ribbon, my smile wide, my eyes searching the crowd. No one had been there to cheer me on. I stared at that photo until the edges blurred with tears. The thought crept in, slow but steady. Maybe this was it. Maybe my family was right all along. Maybe I was nothing. My eyes drifted to the drawer where I kept the pills I'd been prescribed months before for anxiety. For a moment, the temptation was overwhelming. Silence seemed like mercy. But as my hand shook, reaching something else caught my eye, the old wooden box on my shelf. A gift I'd made in high school, carved with care, varnished until it shone. It was meant for my mother, but she had barely looked at it. I had kept it all these years, buried under dust. I opened it, and inside, tucked away, was a note I'd scribbled to myself when I was 16. "One day I'll matter. One day I'll be seen." The words hit me like a hammer to the chest. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing, clutching the box, as if it could hold me together. That night I didn't end it, but I also didn't rise. I stayed in that limbo, half alive, half gone. The downfall was complete. I had lost my family, my friends, my job, my pride. I was a ghost haunting the life I should have lived. And yet in the ashes of my collapse, a spark waited. A knock on the door, a voice I hadn't heard in years. The one person who had every reason to forget me, but chose instead to reach out. The days after my collapse blurred together. Time lost meaning. Morning, night, it was all the same dull grey. I wandered my apartment like a ghost. Bottles scattered across the floor, unopened bills piled higher than the dishes in the sink. Every knock I heard I ignored. But one afternoon, a knock came that wouldn't stop. 3 times 4. Then a voice familiar, yet older, steadier. "Storm. Mrs. Bennet, open the door, dear." For a moment, I froze. Mrs. Bennet had been our neighbour for as long as I could remember. She was the kind of woman who baked pies for holidays and remembered every child's birthday on the block, even mine back when my parents didn't. When I was little, I used to mow her lawn for pocket money, and she'd sneak me cookies when my father wasn't looking. I opened the door, shame washing over me. She stood there, her silver hair tucked under a scarf, eyes sharp but kind. She glanced past me into the mess of my apartment and sighed. "Good Lord, Storm, what have you done to yourself?" I wanted to shut the door, hide the wreck I'd become, but something in her gaze wouldn't let me. She stepped inside without waiting, wrinkling her nose at the stench of whiskey and dust. "This place looks worse than my attic. Sit down, boy." I sat like a child again while she moved around my kitchen, opening windows, tossing bottles into the trash with surprising strength for someone her age. Finally, she placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of me. She must have carried it over. "Eat," she ordered. The first spoonful nearly broke me. Warmth spread through my chest, and suddenly I was weeping into the bowl. "They don't care about me," I choked out. "I gave them everything, and I'm still nothing." Mrs. Bennet sat across from me, her hands folded, her eyes soft. "Families can be blind, Storm. Sometimes they don't see what's right in front of them. But listen to me. Your worth isn't theirs to decide." I shook my head. "But they made me believe it. Every time they forgot me, every time they put him first, it carved me hollow. Maybe they were right." She leaned forward, her voice firm now. "No, dear. You've been measuring yourself by a broken ruler. You think love only counts if it comes from them, but love is bigger than blood. You can choose who you call family." Her words struck like lightning. Love is bigger than blood. I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't that simple, but then she reached into her bag and pulled out an old photograph. It was me years ago, grinning awkwardly at her porch after mowing her lawn, a cookie in my hand. She'd kept it all these years. "You mattered then," she said. "You matter now. You don't need their applause to prove it." Something cracked inside me. Not the old fracture of humiliation, but the faintest glimmer of hope. The next week, Mrs. Bennet invited me over for dinner. At first I resisted, ashamed of how far I'd fallen, but she insisted. When I arrived, her small house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh bread. At the table sat two of her friends from church, people I barely knew. They smiled, asked me questions, listened when I spoke. It was such a simple thing, but I felt something I hadn't in years seen, heard, present. After dinner, Mrs. Bennet walked me to the porch. "You can keep punishing yourself for what they didn't give you," she said gently, "or you can build something new, buy a place of your own, make it yours, fill it with people who care, start again." Her words lingered for days. At first they sounded impossible, but the thought burrowed in. A house, a fresh start, a place not haunted by their absence. So I did something reckless. I took the little savings I had left, combined it with what I could borrow, and bought a small cabin by the lake an hour outside town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a sagging porch and walls that needed more love than I thought I had to give. But it was mine. Not my father's, not my brother's. Mine. The first night I stepped inside, the air smelled of dust and cedar. The floors creaked under my boots. The roof leaked in places, but I didn't care. I sat on the porch looking out at the dark ripples of the lake, and for the first time in years I felt something stirring inside me. Not joy, but possibility. The next weekend I invited a few friends I hadn't seen in months. People I thought I'd lost. They came with toolboxes and paint cans, laughing as we worked to patch the place up. We grilled hot dogs on the porch, drank cheap beer and told stories until midnight. At one point, one of them clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Feels good to see you smile again, man. We missed you." I didn't know how to answer. My throat was too tight. But inside I felt it, that spark Mrs. Bennet had lit. Maybe I didn't need to keep begging for a seat at a table that had no place for me. Maybe I could build my own table, and maybe, just maybe, people would come. The cabin by the lake was falling apart, but so was I. In a way, we were perfect for each other. Broken things understand each other's silence. The first morning I woke up there, the air was crisp, filled with the smell of pine and damp earth. Sunlight slipped through the gaps in the blinds, falling across peeling paint and warped floorboards. Most people would have seen a mess, a money pit. But I saw a challenge. For the first time in years, I wanted to fix something. I started small, a loose board on the porch, a window that wouldn't shut right. My hands were shaky at first, unused to holding tools for anything but survival. But as I hammered nails, sanded edges, brushed paint across old wood, something inside me stirred. It was like rediscovering a language I'd forgotten, one that didn't need words. Word got around. Friends came out on weekends to help. They brought drill saws and laughter I hadn't heard in far too long. We worked all day, then sat by the fire pit at night. I wasn't the shadow in the corner. I was at the centre of something real. Mrs. Bennet visited often, carrying pies and advice. "Doesn't have to be perfect," she said. "Just has to be yours." Weeks bled into months, and slowly the cabin transformed. The walls gleamed with fresh paint. I built shelves with my own hands. The cabin stopped feeling empty. It began to feel alive. But rebuilding wasn't just about wood and nails, it was about me. For years I'd let humiliation define me, but here by the lake I started carving back. I made rules for myself. No bottles in the house. No answering calls from people who only remembered me when they needed something. Instead, I'd answer the door to friends who showed up with nothing but time. I kept a journal. At first it was messy anger and bitterness, but slowly the words shifted. One page read, "Today I built a table. It's crooked, but it held dinner, and that's enough. And that's..." One day, as autumn settled in, I decided to host something I never thought I would again, a birthday party. Not for anyone else, for me. The idea terrified me. What if no one came? But when the day came, they came too. Friends from work, neighbours even. Mrs. Bennet with her famous apple pie. We crowded into the cabin, the table I built, groaning under the weight of food. Laughter bounced off the walls. Warmth filled every corner. When someone brought out a cake, homemade, uneven but beautiful, I nearly broke down. They sang off-key but loud, their voices wrapping around me like a blanket I never knew I needed. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and blew out the candles. For the first time, the wish wasn't desperate. It wasn't, "Please let them see me." It was simple. Let me keep this. Let me hold on to the people who choose me. After everyone left, I stood on the porch, the lake reflecting the moonlight. I thought about my family, the ones who never showed up, who never clapped, who only saw me as a wallet or a shadow. For the first time, the ache was still there, but it didn't own me. The cabin was proof. The laughter, the crooked table, the cake crumbs, it was all proof. I could build something that lasted. I realized rebuilding wasn't about erasing the ruins. It was about using them as the foundation for something new. Every scar, every humiliation, every lonely night, it was wood and nails, painful, heavy, but strong enough to hold. The lake house had become my refuge, my proof that broken things could still be rebuilt. But I knew I was only halfway there. I had built walls strong enough to keep out the pain, but also strong enough to keep out the truth. And the truth was this: I couldn't heal completely while the ghosts of my family still haunted me. The invitation came in the form of a phone call. I almost ignored it. It was Miles. His voice was quieter than I remembered, less triumphant, more human. "Storm," he said, pausing as if the word itself was heavy. "Can we talk? Mum and Dad want you to come over." I nearly hung up. My first instinct was to protect myself, but something inside whispered, "If you don't face them now, you'll carry this weight forever." So I agreed. The drive back to my parents' house felt surreal. The roads were the same, the trees, the old mailbox. But I wasn't the same. My hands gripped the steering wheel steady. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of roast beef and potatoes, familiar, almost comforting. My mother stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling. My father sat at the table, his back, stiff eyes unreadable. Miles hovered near the window. No one spoke at first. Finally, I placed something on the table, an old photo album. "This," I said, flipping it open, "is my life, the part none of you ever saw." Page after page. Me at 10, standing on stage at the piano recital, an empty chair in the front row. Me at 17, cap and gown, smiling alone. Me at work events, birthdays, small victories, all moments where their faces were absent. My mother gasped softly, covering her mouth. My father shifted his jaw, tightening. Miles stepped closer, peering at the images like he was seeing them for the first time. "You never clapped," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "Not once. Every time I looked for you, you were looking at him. Every achievement I had, you brushed aside. And when I said no that night, I wasn't betraying this family. I was saving myself." My father's eyes flashed, but instead of erupting, he slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking older. I thought Miles needed us more," he muttered. "He was destined for great things. You were steady, reliable. I thought you didn't need the praise." The words cut, but also revealed something I hadn't expected: ignorance, not malice. My mother's tears fell freely now. "I didn't see," she whispered. "God forgive me. I didn't see what I was doing to you." Then Miles spoke, his voice shaking. "Storm, I knew I was the favorite. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't stop it either. I let them put me on a pedestal while you were ignored. I'm sorry." For years I had imagined this moment. But standing there watching my family unravel, all I felt was exhaustion. I dropped into a chair, my head in my hands. "I don't need your guilt," I said quietly. "I just need you to understand what it did to me. I nearly destroyed myself trying to earn love that should have been given freely." Silence followed, heavy but not suffocating this time. My mother reached for my hand, tentative. "What can we do now?" I looked at them. "You can start by seeing me, not as his shadow, not as the wallet, just as me. I don't need perfection. I just need honesty." For the first time in decades, my father nodded without argument. My mother squeezed my hand. Miles swallowed hard and whispered, "You're not a shadow, Storm. You never were." Something inside me loosened. Not a full release, but a crack in the wall I'd built enough for light to seep in. That night we ate together. Not in celebration of Miles, not in judgment of me. Just a family sharing a meal, tentative but real. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about facing it, naming it, and choosing every day to do better. As I left, my father's voice followed me to the door, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Come back soon, son." The words weren't perfect, but they were enough. For the first time in years, I drove home, not with anger, but with the quiet beginnings of peace. A year later, the lake house looked nothing like the broken cabin I had first walked into. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls, the porch stood steady. But the biggest change wasn't the house. It was me. On the morning of my 31st birthday, I woke to the sound of laughter outside. Friends bustled around the porch, stringing lights. Mrs. Bennet had already claimed the kitchen, filling the air with the smell of pies. This time there would be no lonely slice of cake. This time it was my celebration. As evening fell, the cabin glowed with warm light. The long table I'd built with my own hands groaned under the weight of food. My friends filled the seats, raising glasses. For the first time in my life, the song of Happy Birthday was sung for me, not drowned out by someone else's applause. Then the door creaked open. The room went quiet as my mother stepped inside, clutching a small cake. Behind her came my father, slower, leaning on his cane, and then Miles, his eyes downcast but steady. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. "Happy birthday, Storm," my mother said, her voice trembling. She set the cake on the table, just one candle flickering softly. "This one's only for you." The silence broke into applause. My friends welcomed them, sliding chairs over, making room at the table. My father lowered himself into a seat, his gaze fixed on me. For once there was no judgment, no command, just presence. Miles clapped me on the shoulder, a quiet nod passing between us. I stared at the candle, the flame reflecting in my eyes. The boy I had been, the boy who sat alone at the piano recital, the teenager ignored on graduation day, the man humiliated at the dinner table. He was still inside me, but he wasn't alone anymore. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and made a wish. Not a desperate plea this time, just a simple truth: I belong. When I blew out the candle, the room erupted in cheers. My mother leaned over, kissing my cheek, whispering, "I see you now." My father raised his glass, his voice steady, to my son. Tears blurred my vision, but for once they weren't born of pain. They were the kind that washed old wounds clean. The night stretched on with laughter stories and the clatter of plates. Under the glow of string lights and stars above the lake, I realized something I never thought I would. I had a family again. Not perfect, not healed overnight, but present, trying, and that was enough. The reunion wasn't about going back to what was broken. It was about building something new on the ruins, stronger, truer, more lasting. As the fire crackled and my loved ones, both chosen and blood, sat around me, I finally felt it, the thing I had been chasing my whole life.